Usually when we talk about a high-stakes professional discipline, right, like um, structural engineering or maybe complex medical diagnosis,
Right.
there is this deep comfort in the expectation of precision. Like if you fall and break your arm, the doctor puts you in an X-ray machine.
Yeah, and the image comes back.
Exactly. The image comes back, there is a jagged white line across your radius, and the doctor just points at it and says, there it is, broken.
It's completely binary. We love that kind of certainty. I mean, it's quantifiable, it's observable, and the rules apply to everyone equally.
Right. You're either broken or you're not. It's just a clean. If you're a civil engineer calculating the load-bearing capacity of a massive steel beam for a suspension bridge, you don't guess.
No, of course not. You use the formula.
Right. The math tells you exactly if the bridge will hold the weight of rush hour traffic.
And we crave that predictability. We want the world to be governed by unbreakable physical laws where, input A always equals output B.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of hard sciences, that's exactly how the universe operates.
But then you step into the world of personal finance, and suddenly that X-ray machine it's completely shattered. The laws of physics seemingly just evaporate.
Yeah, they really do.
We're looking at a landscape that defies almost everything we are taught about how intelligence and expertise are supposed to work.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters, because in the realm of building and, keeping wealth, the hard data, the spreadsheets, all the advanced math,
Yeah.
they're actually secondary to something much, much more unpredictable.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tearing up the traditional blueprints of success. We are diving into a stack of notes and excerpts from Morgan Housel's brilliant work, The Psychology of Money.
It's such a great text.
It really is. And we want to give you, the listener, a completely different lens through which to view your own financial life. We're going to find some very concrete, actionable steps for managing your money.
But we're getting there by exploring the greatest, most mind-bending paradox in modern wealth.
Yes. It's a paradox that completely dismantles how society tells us we should evaluate intelligence.
It really throws a wrench in everything.
So picture these two individuals. We're going to anchor our entire conversation around them today. First, we have the executive.
Oh?
His name is Richard Fuscone. He is the absolute epitome of what you and I would call traditional financial success. He is Harvard educated.
Right.
He has a high-powered MBA. He climbed the ranks to become an incredibly successful executive at Merrill Lynch.
Which, just for context for anyone listening, means he was at the absolute pinnacle of global finance.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you don't get into the executive suite at a major investment bank without possessing just a ferocious intellect and a really deep understanding of complex financial systems.
Exactly. He was so universally respected that he was actually featured in Crane's business magazine's highly coveted 40 under 40 list.
Wow.
Yeah, he made so much money. It was so successful that he actually retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist.
So by every conventional metric, Fuscone was a financial genius. I mean, the former CEO of Merrill Lynch even publicly praised his business savvy, sound judgment, and his personal integrity.
He was the guy.
Yeah, if you had life savings to invest, Richard Fuscone was exactly the guy with the pedigree you'd want managing it.
So hold that image of the executive in your head. Now let's look at the other side of the spectrum, the janitor.
The complete opposite.
Totally.
Yeah.
His name is Ronald Reed. Ronald was born in rural Vermont. He was the very first person in his entire family to even graduate high school.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and he had to hitchhike to campus every single day just to make that happen. For his career, he spent 25 years fixing cars at a local gas station.
Okay.
After that, he spent 17 years sweeping floors as a janitor at a JCPenney.
So a completely ordinary, very quiet life, no Ivy League degree, zero Wall Street connections, and certainly no high-paying corporate salary.
Exactly. He bought a modest two-bedroom house for $12,000 at age 38, and he lived in that exact same house for the rest of his life.
$12,000. That's incredible.
And his absolute favorite hobby was just going outside and chopping firewood.
Sounds peaceful, honestly.
Right. Now, here is the inciting incident. This is the moment that breaks the proverbial X-ray machine we were talking about. In 2014, Ronald Reed, the janitor, dies at the age of 92.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, he makes international headlines. Because when he died, he left behind an $8 million fortune.
$8 million from sweeping floors and fixing carburetors.
I know. He left $2 million to his stepkids and a staggering $6 million to his local hospital and library.
That's just amazing.
And let's be clear, there was no secret lottery win here. There was no long-lost wealthy uncle who left him a trust fund.
Which brings us to the dark mirror of this story, because we have to look at what happened to our Harvard-educated executive, Richard Fuscone, just a few months prior to the janitor's
Yeah,
death.
this is the part that just makes your head spin. 5 months before Ronald Reed leaves his $8 million fortune to charity, Richard Fuscone is standing in front of a bankruptcy judge.
It's hard to even fathom.
Back in the mid-2000s, Fuscone had borrowed incredibly heavily to expand an 18,000 square foot mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut.
18,000 square feet.
We're talking a house with 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 7 garages, and 2 massive pools. It cost $90,000 a month just to maintain the property.
90,000 a month. And then, well, the 2008 global financial crisis hit,
Oh.
and Fuscone's leveraged empire completely collapsed.
He went totally bankrupt. By 2014, while the janitor's estate was handing out millions, the executive's Greenwich mansion was being sold off in a foreclosure auction for 75% less than its estimated value.
Just wiped out.
The executive lost everything. The janitor became a mega philanthropist. But I had to stop and ask, how is this even possible? Because if you think about any other highly specialized field, this simply does not happen.
No, not ever.
Like if I need a complex quadruple bypass heart surgery, a janitor who reads WebMD on his lunch break is never, ever going to outperform a Harvard-trained cardiovascular surgeon.
I would hope not.
Right. Or if we are designing a 100-story skyscraper in a high wind zone, a gas station attendant isn't going to somehow draft a more structurally sound blueprint than the world's top architectural firms. It's absurd to even entertain the thought.
And yet, in finance, it happens, and that specific absurdity proves the entire core thesis of the sources we are looking at today.
Yeah.
Managing money is not a hard science. It's not physics, and it's not advanced mathematics where, memorizing the right formulas dictates your outcome.
So what is it?
Financial success is a soft skill. It is fundamentally a behavioral science. How you behave is vastly more critical than what you conceptually know.
The executive had all the math. He had the data, the pedigree, the Ivy League education, but he succumbed to greed.
Yeah.
And he completely lacked the behavioral discipline required to survive a shock to the system.
Right, whereas the janitor had zero formal financial education, but he possessed unbelievable patience, and he utterly mastered the psychology of wealth.
And that behavioral blueprint is exactly what we are going to decode today. We want to show you the precise mechanics of how the janitor won.
We really need to break it down.
We're going to relentlessly focus on the quiet, earth-shattering power of long-term compounding, the absolute necessity of prioritizing patience over aggressive greed.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to break down how you can actually apply these soft skills to your own life.
So let's get right into the mechanics of this, because if I'm listening to this, my first question is, literally, how does a janitor amass $8 million on a minimum wage salary without hitting the Powerball?
It's the ultimate question.
What is the mathematical engine behind Ronald Reed's invisible wealth?
Right.
The secret weapon here is compounding. According to the sources, Ronald Reed's strategy was almost aggressively boring.
Aggressively boring. I like that.
He lived below his means, he saved whatever small amount he could from his modest paychecks, and he invested those savings into blue-chip stocks.
Let's actually pause and define that for anyone who isn't, checking the stock market every single day. What makes something a blue chip stock?
Sure, so it's a term borrowed from poker, where the blue chips are the most valuable. In finance, a blue chip stock refers to a massive, incredibly stable, nationally recognized company.
Okay.
Think of brands that have been around forever, that have a history of weathering economic storms, and that usually pay out a portion of their profits to investors as dividends.
So not the flashy stuff.
Exactly. He wasn't buying risky, speculative tech startups. He was buying the corporate equivalent of steady, predictable workhorses.
Okay, so he buys these stable companies. But buying stable companies doesn't instantly make you a millionaire.
No, it really doesn't. And that leads to the most critical part of his strategy. He just waited.
He just waited.
He bought them, and then he waited for decades on end.
Hmm.
He let tiny incremental growth compound over and over until it ballooned into an $8 million fortune.
Now, compounding is one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around in finance so often that it completely loses its punch. Our eyes glaze over.
Oh, totally. It just sounds like math homework.
But the author uses a truly brilliant analogy to explain just how counterintuitive and overwhelmingly powerful this force actually is.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with money.
Oh, right. The Ice Ages.
Yes, it has to do with the Ice Ages.
The billion-year geological history of the Earth. If we take a step back for a very long time, the brightest scientific minds couldn't figure out why ice ages occurred.
Right.
They knew the Earth had been repeatedly covered in miles of ice, but the cause was just a complete mystery.
Because intuitively, when we look at a massive result, like the entire northern hemisphere of the planet being crushed under a sheet of ice 2 miles thick, our brains assume there must have been a massive catastrophic cause.
Right, exactly. Scientists formulated theories about tremendous forces. They thought maybe the Earth's orbit underwent a violent shift, or perhaps there were extreme volcanic winters that blocked out the sun, or that the sun's energy output itself drastically fluctuated. They were looking for an event with explosive power.
But it turns out that's not how it works at all. The actual trigger for an ice age is almost embarrassingly subtle.
It really is.
It all begins with a slightly cooler summer. Not a freezing apocalyptic summer, just mildly cool.
Yeah.
It's cool enough that the snowfall from the previous winter doesn't entirely melt away.
So when the next winter rolls around, there's already a thin, lingering layer of snow on the ground.
And here's where the compounding kicks in. Because ice and snow are white, they possess a high albedo, meaning they reflect significantly more of the sun's radiation back into space than dark soil or ocean water would.
Right.
Because that sunlight is reflected, the Earth absorbs slightly less heat.
Which naturally ensures that the following summer is even cooler.
Exactly.
Which means an even thicker layer of snow survives the summer melt, which reflects even more sunlight, which causes colder winters, which creates thicker ice.
It just feeds on itself.
You repeat this seemingly insignificant, quiet cycle over and over, and within a few thousand years, you have a continental ice sheet destroying everything in its path.
A little bit of leftover snow serves as the fuel for more snow.
Huh.
That is compounding. You do not need tremendous force to create tremendous results.
No, we don't.
You just need a small starting base that serves as fuel for uninterrupted future growth.
And when you apply that geological reality to human finance, the results are staggering. Let's look at the ultimate icon of modern wealth, Warren Buffett.
Oh, here's where it gets really interesting. This is the statistic that completely changed how I view wealth.
It's a crazy one.
At the time our source material was written, Warren Buffett's net worth was roughly $84.5 billion. Now, if you had to guess, how much of that $84.5 billion do you think was generated after his 65th birthday?
See, the average person assumes wealth building is linear. You work hard in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, and you steadily build your fortune over your working life.
But it's not linear. Of his $84.5 billion net worth, a staggering $81.5 billion came after he qualified for Social Security.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
More than 96% of his total immense wealth was generated when he was technically a senior citizen.
This forces us to reevaluate what we actually admire about successful investors. We culturally attribute all of Buffett's success to his unparalleled investing acumen.
Oh, right, I think he's just a genius.
We think he just picks the right stocks better than anyone else alive. And yes, he is a phenomenal investor. But his true secret weapon, the actual engine of his billions, isn't just his skill.
What is it?
It's his time horizon. He started seriously investing when he was 10 years old.
The sources run a fascinating thought experiment to prove this. Imagine if Warren Buffett had lived a normal life. Let's say he spends his teens and 20s finding himself backpacking through Europe and figuring out his career.
Sure.
By age 30, he gets his act together and has a respectable net worth of $25,000.
A very normal trajectory for a young professional.
Right. Now, from age 30 onward, he still goes on to earn the exact same extraordinary 22% annual returns he's famous for. He's still an investing genius.
Okay.
But like a normal person, he decides to retire at age 60 to play golf, travel, and hang out with his grandkids. He stops investing. What would his net worth be today?
Well, it certainly wouldn't be $84.5 billion.
Try $11.9 million.
Wow.
That is 99.9% less than his actual net worth. All of that difference, that massive, incomprehensible gap between $11.9 million and $84.5 billion, is purely the result of the time he allowed his money to compound.
To really cement this concept, the text introduces a fascinating contrast. Have you ever heard of Jim Simons?
Most people haven't, unless they are really deep in the finance world.
Simons was a brilliant mathematician and codebreaker who eventually started a highly secretive quantitative hedge fund called Renaissance Technologies. Since 1988, Jim Simons compounded his money at 66% annually.
Wait, I just need to emphasize how insane that is. Earning 66% a year, every year, is basically defying the laws of financial gravity. It's 3 times higher than Warren Buffett's 22% annual return.
Oh, yeah. No one in the history of finance comes close to Simons' rate of return. But here is the catch. At the time of this writing, Simon's net worth was around $21 billion.
Okay.
He is 75% less wealthy than Warren Buffett, despite having an investment return that is 3 times better.
How did the math on that even work?
Because Jim Simons didn't find his financial stride and start aggressively compounding until he was 50 years old. He simply had less than half the years to compound that Buffett did.
But wait, if the math is this definitive, if time is so vastly more important than the actual rate of return you get, why do we all run around desperately trying to find the next big tech stock?
Yeah, or the highest yielding crypto coin.
Right, or the fastest way to double our money.
Yeah.
If patience is the answer, why are we all so frantic?
It's a biological problem. The human brain evolved to understand linear progression. If you were a hunter-gatherer, you picked a bush of berries, you ate the berries, you needed 2 bushes tomorrow to feed 2 people, it's linear addition. Our brains are simply not wired to process exponential growth.
The sources use a great mental exercise to illustrate this. If I ask you to calculate 8 plus 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 8 in your head,
Yeah, you can do it.
right, it takes a second. But you can visualize stacking those 8s. It's 72.
But if I ask you to calculate 8 times 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 8, your brain just short circuits.
Totally.
You cannot visualize the leaps because the jumps get too big too fast. For the record, it's over 134 million.
134,217,728 to be exact.
Because compounding is so profoundly counterintuitive, we consistently underestimate its potential. We ignore it because we can't really feel it working in the short term.
Yeah.
We mistakenly assume that to get rich, we need to exert maximum effort to extract the highest possible return right now, today.
We want the explosive volcano to cause the ice age. We don't want to wait for the cool summers.
Precisely. So we trade constantly. We jump in and out of the market. We take massive risks looking for one-off hits. But those astronomical returns are usually unrepeatable and fraught with catastrophic risk.
If you're listening to this on your commute or, while you're walking the dog, the actionable step here is actually incredibly freeing.
It really is a relief.
You do not need to stress yourself out trying to find the perfect investment that's going to make you rich overnight.
Yeah.
Your only job is to shift your entire paradigm. Stop seeking the highest possible returns. Stop swinging for the home run. Instead, your goal should be to earn what we might call pretty good returns that you can stick with uninterrupted for the longest possible period of time.
Exactly.
Time is the quiet multiplier that turns pretty good into utterly extraordinary.
But that brings up a really dangerous flip side to this coin. Because if compounding is the slow, steady path that allowed the janitor to quietly amass his millions, what was the violent force that so quickly derailed the Harvard-educated executive?
Right. Understanding the math of growth is only half the battle. Now we have to look at the psychology of survival.
Which is huge.
It's time to examine the executive's fatal flaw, which exposes a massive, often misunderstood difference between getting wealthy and staying wealthy.
The sources highlight a critical distinction here that most people completely miss. We treat wealth as a single skill, but getting money and keeping money require completely different, almost diametrically opposed psychological toolkits.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, to get wealthy, you need to be an optimist. You need to take risks. You have to believe in a future that doesn't exist yet. And you have to be willing to put your capital and your reputation on the line to build it.
But to stay wealthy, you have to do the exact opposite. Staying wealthy requires a profound sense of frugality and a very healthy dose of paranoia.
Yes, paranoia is key.
You have to be hyper-aware that what you've made can be taken away from you in an instant by forces entirely outside of your control. You need a survival mindset.
The text brings in some legendary historical figures to illustrate how dangerous it is to lack that paranoia. Let's talk about Jesse Livermore.
Oh, this is a crazy story.
In the early 20th century, Livermore was arguably the greatest stock market trader alive. By age 30, he had amassed a fortune worth the inflation-adjusted equivalent of $100 million.
And then came the infamous 1929 market crash. While the rest of the country was facing total financial devastation, while people were losing their homes and their life savings, Livermore had correctly anticipated the crash. He was shorting the market.
Which is such a bold move.
Let's actually clarify shorting for a second, just to understand how wild this was. For those who don't trade, shorting basically means you are betting that a stock or the whole market is going to fail.
Right.
You borrow shares, sell them at the current high price, and then when the price crashes, you buy them back for pennies, return the shares, and pocket the difference.
It is highly risky because if the market goes up instead of down, your losses can be infinite.
It takes nerves of steel. But Livermore nailed it. In a single week during the 1929 crash, while the economy burned, Jesse Livermore made the equivalent of $3 billion.
$3 billion in a week. Imagine the psychological effect that must have on a human being.
It would make you feel invincible.
And it was devastating, ironically. He had utterly mastered the art of getting wealthy, but that extreme, almost godlike success bred extreme overconfidence.
Yeah.
He felt infallible. He thought he could outsmart the market every single time. So instead of securing his wealth, he kept making larger and larger, increasingly reckless bets.
And eventually, the market stopped doing what he predicted. The tide turned. He lost everything. He went entirely broke, disappeared for a couple of days, and tragically, eventually took his own life. He knew exactly how to get it, but had absolutely zero concept of how to keep it.
And this isn't just ancient history from the 1920s. There's another fascinating example in the sources that hits closer to modern investing. Rick Guerin.
Everyone knows Warren Buffett and his late partner, Charlie Munger. They are the grandfathers of value investing. But back in the early days, there was a third guy in their inner circle, Rick Guerin.
They were a trio. They made investments together. They interviewed corporate managers together. Buffett once said that Charlie, Warren, and Rick were all equally brilliant at analyzing businesses and getting wealthy.
So why is Rick Guerin not a household name? Why isn't his face on the cover of Forbes alongside Buffett?
Because Rick Guerin was in a hurry. He understood the math of compounding, but he wanted it to happen faster. So in the early 1970s, he started using margin loans to heavily leverage his stock purchases.
Okay, let's use a real estate analogy to explain how dangerous margin is.
Good idea.
If you want to buy a $100,000 house, but you only have $20,000, you borrow $80,000 from the bank. If the house goes up in value to $120,000, your original $20,000 investment just doubled. That's the magic of leverage.
Right.
But if the housing market drops and the house is now only worth $70,000, well, the bank starts getting nervous.
Really nuts.
Bank says, "Hey, you owe us $80,000, but the asset is only worth $70,000. Give us more cash right now, or we are selling the house from under you to get our money back." That is a margin call.
Exactly. Guerin borrowed money to buy more stock than he could actually afford. And then the massive 1973 to 1974 economic downturn hit. The stock market dropped almost 70% over 2 years.
Which triggered the margin calls. The brokers demanded their money back immediately.
Guerin was backed into a corner. He was forced to sell his stock. And painfully, this included his shares in Buffett's own Berkshire Hathaway at bargain basement, panic-induced prices just to pay off his loans. Ironically, he sold those shares directly to Warren Buffett for under $40 apiece. Guerin was wiped out. He was a brilliant stock picker, but he lacked the paranoia to survive a severe market contraction.
Which brings us right back to Richard Fuscone, the Merrill Lynch executive with the 18,000 square foot mansion. Fuscone didn't lack intelligence. He didn't lack data. He lacked survival skills. He wanted 2 elevators and a $90,000 a month lifestyle. And to fund that unbelievably massive burn rate, he borrowed heavily. He leveraged his life to the hilt.
Yep.
When the 2008 financial crisis arrived, credit froze. He had absolutely no margin of safety. He was forced into bankruptcy.
The author Nassim Taleb summarizes this perfectly in the text. He argues that having an edge, being smart, having a great strategy, and actually surviving are 2 completely different things.
Right.
And the first requires the second. You must avoid ruin at all costs. Because if you get wiped out, if you go to zero, you can't play the game anymore. Your compounding journey ends the moment you are forced to sell.
The realization here for all of us is that we need to actively cultivate a survival mindset. More than desiring massive returns, your primary financial goal should simply be to become financially unbreakable.
That's the perfect word for it. Unbreakable.
It means avoiding margin debt. It means keeping enough cash on hand so you aren't forced to sell your stocks when the market crashes just to pay your rent. If you can simply survive the inevitable economic disasters without being forced to liquidate, your compounding will continue in the background and you will ultimately win.
But exploring Fuscone's massive failure naturally leads us to a much deeper, darker psychological question.
Okay, what's that?
Why did Richard Huscone, a man who already had millions of dollars in the bank, who had already unequivocally won the game of capitalism, feel the overwhelming need to borrow money to build an 11-bathroom house?
Right.
Why risk total financial ruin when you already have more than enough to last a lifetime?
That is the multi-million-dollar question. What psychological virus infects a person to risk everything they have for something they don't even need?
Yeah.
It all comes down to an inability to define the word enough.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. This is the psychology of the moving goalpost.
The sources cite two incredibly stark modern examples of this phenomenon: Rajat Gupta and Bernie Madoff. Let's look at Gupta first. Rajat Gupta was the CEO of McKinsey, arguably the most prestigious consulting firm in the world. He sat on the board of directors for Goldman Sachs. He was universally respected, and he had amassed a personal fortune estimated at $100 million.
Wow.
By any measure, he was living in the top fraction of the 1%.
$100 million is generational wealth.
Yeah.
His great-grandchildren would have been wealthy?
But $100 million wasn't a billion.
Ah, there it is.
He wanted to be a billionaire. He was surrounded by billionaires, and he felt inadequate. So during the chaos of the 2008 financial crisis, while he was sitting on the board of Goldman Sachs, he learned strictly confidential insider information.
What was it?
Warren Buffett was planning to inject $5 billion into the bank to save it from collapse. Gupta took this incredibly sensitive information, picked up the phone, and called a hedge fund manager friend so they could buy Goldman stock before the news went public.
Wait, so he actually called his friend while still acting on the board.
Yes.
That is textbook insider trading.
He went to federal prison. He completely destroyed his legacy, his pristine reputation, and his literal physical freedom. For what? For money he didn't need.
Bernie Madoff is the exact same tragic narrative. We all know Madoff as the mastermind of the largest Ponzi scheme in history. But what gets forgotten is that before the massive fraud, Madoff ran an extremely successful, entirely legitimate market-making business.
Right.
He was legally earning tens of millions of dollars a year.
But it wasn't enough. The legitimate millions weren't fast enough or big enough to satisfy his ego. So he turned to fraud, ruining thousands of lives, and died in a prison hospital.
The text highlights a rule that seems painfully obvious in hindsight, but is constantly ignored by high achievers. There is no reason to risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need.
Exactly.
But I have to play devil's advocate here. Isn't ambition a good thing?
Sure.
Like, if we didn't want more, we wouldn't have technological progress, we wouldn't build businesses, we'd still be living in caves. Why is it so hard for successful people to realize when ambition crosses the line into self-destructive greed?
Because of the insidious nature of social comparison, the hardest financial skill in the world isn't picking stocks, it's getting the goalpost to stop moving. If your definition of success is driven by constantly comparing your wealth to the people around you, you are engaging in a game that you can literally never, ever win.
Because there is always a bigger fish.
Always. Let's look at the hierarchy of wealth. A rookie professional baseball player making $500,000 a year feels like the richest guy in his hometown.
Right. He's a king.
He feels incredibly successful until he gets to the major leagues and plays alongside Mike Trout, who makes $36 million a year. Suddenly, the rookie feels poor.
Yeah.
But Mike Trout looks at a Wall Street hedge fund manager who takes home $340 million in a single year, and Trout feels like he's underachieving. The hedge fund manager looks at Warren Buffett making $3.5 billion in a good year, and Warren Buffett looks at Jeff Bezos, whose net worth once increased by $24 billion in a single 12-month period.
The ceiling of social comparison is so astronomically high that nobody, not even the billionaires, ever hits it. If you gauge your success by looking at the guy next to you, you will always feel inadequate.
Which means the only way to actually win that game is to flat out refuse to play it. You have to intellectually accept that you have enough, even if it is objectively less than the person next to you.
It's the only way out.
The text shares this great anecdote about a guy who goes to Las Vegas. He sits down with a veteran, grizzled casino dealer.